The nation of Israel has faced continual threats since its founding back in 1948. Despite ongoing wars, the Jewish state has thrived. It's also been a source of help for other nations in their times of need. Stand Up Nation is a new book that tells how Israelis are sending humanitarian aid and sharing their expertise with countries around the world.
In the early hours of October 7th, Israel faced one of the most brutal attacks in its history. Shockwaves from that day touched the depths of Israel's soul while igniting a storm of grief, fear, and uncertainty. In this time of death and darkness, a profound resilience began to rise. Aviva Klumpus, author of Stand Up Nation, takes readers on a journey through the lives of unsung heroes and ordinary Israelis living extraordinary lives. Her book captures Israel's indomitable spirit and the heart and grit of a people who, even in the face of terror, refuse to be broken. It's a testament to Israel's strength, not just as a country, but as a family that stands together. Forged from decades of adversity, tragedy, and enemies seeking their destruction, Israelis' determination has become legendary. Through powerful stories of courage and unity, this former UN speechwriter reveals how hope, faith, and the will to stand up allow Israelis to rise again and again. Klumpus also celebrates Israel's history and the Jewish principle of tikkun olam, healing the world. Today, that humanitarian aid includes helping war refugees seeking shelter on a Greek island, to providing wells to an African village bringing life-giving water, all in an effort to help heal our suffering world. It's an amazing, often untold story now revealed.
Well, Stand Up Nation author Aviva Klumpus joins us now from our CBN News Bureau. Welcome to the 700 Club. It's a joy to have you with us.
It's such an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, let's talk about Israel's history. It seems to be incredible. Here's the nation the size of New Jersey. It seems to be punching well above its weight in terms of offering humanitarian aid around the world. Why is that such a seemingly well-kept secret?
That's exactly the question that I had, which is, why is this great story of Israel an untold story of Israel? So I used to serve as the speechwriter for Israel's delegation to the United Nations, and I was writing speeches on a huge array of topics that the UN covers: peace and security, economics, women's rights, and so on and so forth. But when it came to writing about international development and humanitarian aid, I found myself captivated when I was learning about the early story of Israel. It has this really remarkable situation where Israel itself is a developing country for its first 10 years. And it's in the context of this country being desperately poor, being a nation that is fighting existential wars against its neighbors. It's a nation made up of Holocaust survivors, refugees from Arab lands. Its economy is tanking. It is not the land of milk and honey as described in the Bible. It is dry, it is arid, and it's in this context that Israel goes and founds an international development agency. Israel, this tiny, poor country, has an international development agency before the United States, before Canada, before the UN has its development program. And I wanted to tell the story of how that came to be.
So your book goes into some of the quotes from Israel's leaders in history as to why, and those quotes really reverberated with me. It just seemed to be a national obligation that somehow if we don't do this, we're going to be missing out. What's the background to that?
So what happens is that Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, he appoints Golda Meir to be the first foreign minister. This is in 1956, so it's just 8 years after Israel is founded. And Golda Meir, as the foreign minister, is looking around the world, and she sees that it's a country that is diplomatically and politically isolated. It does not have a lot of friends in the world, a situation not unfamiliar to what is happening today. As I said, it's desperately poor. It's a country of refugees. The government has to institute austerity measures that are basically rationing basic goods. And Golda Meir says, I need to change this situation. And she's looking around at the context of the international community, and she's looking at the continent of Africa. Now, at this time, waves of decolonization are spreading across Africa. Country after country gains its independence and goes on to join the United Nations. So Golda Meir decides to go and take a tour through a number of newly founded African nations. And she goes, and what she discovers is that there's a situation very similar to Israel. The countries are new, they're emerging from under the thumb of colonialism, they're dry, they're arid, they're poor. Golda Meir goes to David Ben-Gurion and she says, the context is the same, but here's the difference. I am absolutely certain that Israel is going to transform itself into a prosperous nation, and in the process of doing so, I want us to lift up these other nations by sharing what we have. We don't have money, but what we have is knowledge, and we have what you're describing, audacity or chutzpah.
Well, what's the impact of that? You were at the UN. It seems to me that either the countries don't know about the aid that they've received from Israel, but it just seems like every time the General Assembly votes, it tends to vote against Israel. Why is that? Why isn't there gratitude for what has happened?
You're absolutely right. Every fall when we're at the General Assembly, we see that country after country votes against Israel over and over again. The same at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. One of the reasons is that Israel has never made it contingent. The aid is not contingent on political favors or UN votes. It's a true act of generosity to be able to do it. And I think that it's a reasonable question to ask about whether these countries should be showing greater reciprocity and favorability towards Israel.
Well, let's look at just recent history. You know, since October 7th, is the same fire to help the world, is that still there in Israeli society, or is there an inclination to pull back? And maybe it's too soon after Amsterdam to really answer, but are people feeling that they might actually be at risk in going to other countries to extend humanitarian aid?
What we've seen in the last 14 months since the absolute atrocities of October 7th is something that I don't think we'll see again in our lifetime. We're living through something that's a truly remarkable period of history, not just for Israel and for the Jewish people, but really for the entire world. And you can see that in the way that this war is being played out, as you said, on the streets of Amsterdam and Antwerp and New York City and throughout the United States. And what I would say is that even in Israel's earliest year, in the context that I described, the challenges that it was facing, Israel's leaders had a choice to make. And it would have been more than reasonable for their leaders to say, we have to turn inwards and we have to look after ourselves. The same thing is true today. It would be more than reasonable for Israel's government and for the Israeli people to say we have to turn inwards and look after only ourselves. And yet that actually hasn't been the response. All of the international development organizations that I profile in my book are still doing this work. It's much harder for them because right now it's much harder to raise money. Most people want to give money for the survivors of October 7th, for evacuees in Israel that have been forced from their homes in the south and in the north. But the determination to do this work, this willingness to do the work, the devotion to the work, that remains unchanged.
Well, that is a true testament to the spirit of Israel. It's always amazed me how much you want to reach out and help other people. And in that, I can't help but point out, Hamas has never helped anyone. Hezbollah has never helped anyone. And I'll put out there, the nation of Iran has never helped anyone. You know, that it all seems to be bent on this death cult. And it's amazing to me the world would rally around them and not rally around Israel. Absent a spiritual explanation that somehow or other evil attracts this kind of support, do you see any reason for that?
I believe that the American people and most people are decent, honest, good people that can tell the difference between right and wrong. And what we need those decent, honest, good people to do is to speak up. And one way that they can speak up is to help the hostages that are still being held in Gaza, 101 people, of which 7 are American, and 4 of whom are believed to be alive. And it's imperative on every single American, on every single decent person, to learn their names and to take up their cause and ensure that we bring them home alive.
In doing documentaries on Israel, one of the amazing things that I've discovered is that even secular Israelis who aren't reading the Tanakh, aren't studying Scripture, are saying, just from their innermost being, we are supposed to be a light to the nations. What can the world learn from Israel's leadership in this?
I love that question. I actually divided my book into 4 different chapters. I try to make a case for why Israel is doing this work outside of its borders. As we said, it's an untold story, and as you pointed out, there's no reciprocity. Israel doesn't seem to be benefiting economically or politically, so why does it happen? I think it goes to the core of who Israel and the Jewish people are. So I speak about how the reasons it happens are for what you said, tikkun olam, this idea that we can build a better world, the pragmatism, the simple idea that every person wants to have a better life for their family, for their community, for their society, and for their country. The adventurism, this desire that all of us have to go out into the world to meet and experience new things. And chutzpahism, which is that audacity, that notion that you can look at the world and say the problems are absolutely overwhelming and one person can't make a difference. But I profile people in this book that say we can absolutely make a difference. Look what we've done.
Well, the book is wonderful. It's called Stand Up Nation. You can find it wherever books are sold, and you can learn the secret of why Israel is a light to the nations. It's a really incredible read. So, Aviva Klampus, thanks so much for joining with us, and you can be assured we're standing with you. We're standing with Israel in her time of need.
What makes Israel so special? How has Israel overcome history's greatest challenges to not just survive, but thrive? CBN Films answers all of these questions in the new movie, The Genius of Israel. This movie explores Israel's journey through adversity, unity, and innovation. If you want to check out more, go to the link in the description to stream the film today.